Remember when dinner was more than just a quick takeaway? Back when ground beef wasn't just a last-minute fix, but the main event, bringing families together around the table. Those meals, those recipes, were more than just food. They were moments, memories, and magic. Over time, many of these dishes have slipped from our kitchens, but today we're resurrecting these hidden treasures, 25 ground beef recipes that disappeared from family tables. Each one tells a story worth revisiting. These aren't just recipes. They're part of our shared history, and they deserve to shine again. Let me introduce you to some of these long-lost kitchen secrets. 1. Hobo dinner packets. In the 1930s, when money was scarce and creativity was abundant, families found ingenious ways to stretch simple ingredients into hearty meals. One such invention was the Hobo dinner packet. Imagine this: a perfectly seasoned ground beef patty, carefully wrapped in foil along with carrots, potatoes, and onions. This meal was born alongside the railroad tracks, where workers needed quick and easy meals they could cook over a campfire. The foil packet wasn't just convenient. It was a secret weapon for turning tough cuts of beef into tender, flavorful bites. Railroad workers discovered something incredible when they wrapped everything together. The vegetables released their natural juices, making the beef more tender than you'd ever expect. And here's a little secret that's often overlooked. Right before sealing the packet, they'd add a small pat of butter and a sprinkle of dried thyme. As the packet cooked, the butter melted, creating a sauce so delicious, it was pure heaven. What's fascinating is how this simple idea transitioned from necessity to tradition. Originally a working-class staple, these Hobo packets became a favorite at backyard cookouts and camping trips. Sure, they were basic, but they had something modern meals often lack: a sense of magic. There's something special about unwrapping that foil and being hit by a cloud of savory steam, signaling that dinner is about to blow your taste buds away. 2. Swedish potato beef casserole. Now, let's take a trip to a different corner of the world, Sweden, to be exact. Long before casseroles became mainstream in American kitchens, Swedish immigrants were bringing their own culinary traditions to the dinner table. One such dish was the Swedish potato beef casserole, a beautiful layering of thinly sliced potatoes and ground beef, each layer separated by a velvety white sauce that could make any grandmother weak in the knees. This wasn't just any cream sauce. No, it was laced with nutmeg and white pepper, secrets passed down through generations of Swedish families, some of whom settled in Minnesota. What made this casserole truly special, however, was the way the potatoes were layered. Each slice had to overlap perfectly, creating a beautiful pattern that wasn't just visually appealing, but also practical. When the beef mixture hit the potatoes, something magical happened. In the oven, the juices from the beef seeped down through the layers, creating pockets of flavor that would have everyone at the holiday table asking, "Can I have a recipe?" Cincinnati-style chili mac. Cincinnati-style chili mac isn't your typical chili. Oh no, it's a whole different experience. Picture this: ground beef simmered in a sauce that will make your taste buds come alive. Spices like cinnamon, chocolate, and a mix of seasonings that would leave most chili competition winners scratching their heads. This wasn't some spontaneous experiment. The clever Greek restaurant owners blended their knowledge of Mediterranean flavors with good old American comfort food, creating a dish that became an iconic five-way sensation. It all started with a bed of spaghetti. Then came the spiced beef, followed by a heap of beans, onions, and a mountain of finely shredded cheese. But here's a twist not everyone knows. The original recipe included a dash of red wine vinegar, cutting through the richness and letting the spices shine like never before. Each local diner had its own secret spice blend, and those recipes were guarded like priceless treasures. Depression era, Meatloaf Wellington. Sometimes The simplest dishes pack the most surprises, and this next recipe proves it. The Depression-era Meatloaf Wellington is a true testament to the creativity born out of hard times. During the Great Depression, home cooks took the classic, expensive beef Wellington and transformed it into something remarkable. This wasn't just about making do, it was about making magic. Instead of pricey cuts of beef, seasoned ground beef took center stage. The real genius, though, was in the crust. Home cooks discovered that a basic mix of flour, water, and whatever fat they had on hand could create layers nearly as flaky as the original puff pastry. They'd roll it paper thin, fold it with care, and bake it to perfection, producing a golden exterior that made everyone forget about hard times, if only for one meal. The presentation was just as impressive. Each loaf had a pattern scored on top, sometimes a simple wheat design, other times crosshatch marks. These weren't just decorative. They were symbols of pride, transforming an ordinary Sunday dinner into something special. Ground beef radio dinner. Now, let's turn the dial to the 1930s. A time when radios brought families together around their dinner tables. This wasn't just any meal. It was a radio dinner, perfectly timed to be ready during your favorite evening program. Families would gather around, plates in hand, listening to their favorite radio shows while enjoying this clever dish. The beauty was in its timing. You'd start browning the beef just as Amos and Andy began. Add the vegetables when Jack Benny cracked his first joke, and by the time the evening's mystery show reached its peak, dinner was ready to serve. The entire meal was prepared not in minutes, but by the rhythm of radio segments, creating a dining experience that was both synchronized and delightful. Beef and cornmeal tomato pie. Down along the southwest border, something extraordinary was cooking in American kitchens. The beef and cornmeal tomato pie was making waves, combining hearty ground beef and cornmeal into a unique, savory pie. This dish, with its bold flavors, became a staple in the region, capturing the essence of local tastes and traditions. The beef and cornmeal tomato pie perfectly blended Mexican traditions with the resourcefulness of the Depression era. This wasn't just another casserole. It was a true masterpiece born at the crossroads of culture and necessity. The secret was in the cornmeal crust. Unlike today's quick mixes, these home cooks knew the magic was in toasting the cornmeal first. They'd slowly stir it in a dry skillet until the air was filled with an aroma so rich you could almost taste it from down the block. Once the cornmeal was toasted to perfection, they'd add hot water, just like the Mexican neighbors had taught them, creating a base that was crispy on the outside yet tender on the inside. The filling was just as special. Seasoned ground beef mixed with chilies, garlic, and a pinch of cumin, spices that were starting to make their way into American kitchens. But here's the clever part. They'd stretch that precious beef with whatever vegetables were growing in the garden, making the dish feed more mouths without sacrificing flavor. When times were tough, this pie could feed twice as many people as a typical meal, and nobody went home hungry. Sunday night hash sule. Let's move on to a post-war classic, the Sunday night hash sule. It might sound fancy, but it was born out of pure practicality. After the big Sunday family dinner, clever cooks would take leftover roast beef, grind it fresh, and mix it with yesterday's potatoes, transforming them into something completely new. The real magic wasn't in the ingredients, but in the technique. They'd fold whipped egg whites into the mixture, much like the French too, but with a distinctly American twist. Every family had their own method. Some swore by beating the eggs with a fork exactly 100 times, while others had special copper bowls passed down through generations, reserved just for this dish. When that hash sule came out of the oven, golden and puffed up proud, it didn't matter that it started as leftovers. It was a brand new creation, turning Sunday night into a special occasion. Somehow, it made the evening feel just as important as the afternoon meal. Pioneer Trail, mixed meatballs. As American kitchens evolved, another clever dish made its mark. Pioneer Trail mixed meatballs. These were inspired by the courageous families who made their way westward on the wagon trains. But these pioneers didn't just carry dreams. They carried practical cooking knowledge that would change American food forever. The Pioneer Trail mixed meatballs were born on those dusty trails, where every ingredient had to earn its place in the wagon. These weren't ordinary meatballs. Pioneer women mixed ground beef with dried fruits they had packed for the journey: raisins, dried apples, and even dried berries. The fruit didn't just add a touch of sweetness. It helped keep the meat moist during long hours of cooking over open fires. Once the meatballs were rolled, they were coated in crushed dried corn, creating a protective outer layer that helped them stay fresh for longer. Those cast-iron Dutch ovens weren't just cooking pots. They were survival tools. Nestled in hot coals, they transformed these fruited meatballs into a dish that could fuel a family through days of hard travel. The real innovation, though, came from saving the cooking liquid. Once it cooled, it turned into a gel that preserved the leftover meatballs for the next day's journey. Each of those cast-iron Dutch ovens tells a story of survival and ingenuity, with every dent and scratch serving as a reminder of the hardships and creativity of the pioneers. You won't believe the tricks they used to prepare these meals and keep their families fed on the move. Victory Garden Beef Pie. Our next forgotten recipe is the Victory Garden Beef Pie, a true testament to resourcefulness during World War II. As the war raged, American kitchens became battlegrounds of their own, fighting against waste and scarcity. This pie wasn't just a meal, it was a way of contributing to the war effort. With every backyard garden acting as a small front line against rationing, home cooks mixed ground beef with whatever their victory gardens yielded: carrots, peas, potatoes, turning a single pound of meat into a hearty feast. But here's the twist. The crust wasn't your usual pastry. Instead, it was made with mashed turnips or parsnips, packing in nutrients while saving precious flour for the troops. And in neighborhoods across the country, families coordinated their planting. One house might grow tomatoes, while another raised beans. When harvest time came, they'd share their bounty, ensuring everyone could make these pies with different vegetables. It wasn't just about filling bellies. It was about strengthening communities during trying times. Railway station beef turnovers. Next up, we have the railway station beef turnovers, a perfect example of American ingenuity during the golden age of train travel. Back when trains were the main mode of transportation, station kitchens served up a snack that could keep travelers content for miles. These weren't your average hand pies. They were little miracles wrapped in flaky pastry. The crust was unlike any other, so delicate it would shatter like glass, yet sturdy enough to survive a long journey. The station cooks had a secret. They folded butter into the dough 13 times, creating layers so fine they practically melted in your mouth. As for the filling, it was seasoned ground beef mixed with finely diced potatoes and onions, blending the flavors perfectly in every bite. These turnovers were made to be piping hot by the time the train arrived, wrapped in wax paper to warm the hands and hearts of weary travelers. Each station had its own unique twist, perhaps a pinch of sage in Minnesota or a dash of paprika in St. Louis. But wherever you went, these turnovers were a beloved treat. Depression stretcher patties. As the Great Depression hit, American kitchens had to get even more creative. That's when Depression stretcher patties made their way to dinner tables across the country. These weren't just ordinary patties. They were a brilliant response to tough times. Home cooks discovered that by mixing cooked rice into ground beef, they could stretch their meat further while enhancing the flavor. The rice would absorb all the meat juices, making the patty more savory than a simple beef version. The technique was genius in its simplicity. Mix 1 part ground beef with 2 parts cooked rice. Add a splash of milk to keep everything moist, and season with whatever you had on hand. Some cooks even added grated carrots or onions to stretch the meal further. The real secret? Pressing each patty thin and cooking it until the edges became crispy, which, trust me, were the best part of the meal. These patties turned an ordinary dish into something extraordinary, ensuring families could eat well, even when resources were scarce. Lunch counter beef scramble. While some cooks were mastering the art of stretching ingredients, others were revolutionizing the lunchtime experience. Enter the lunch counter beef scramble. The chrome-plated diners that lined American highways had their own secret weapon, a hearty, satisfying beef scramble that could fill up a hungry traveler in no time. Lunch counter beef scramble. The lunch counter beef scramble wasn't just about quick cooking. It was a true art form, performed right before your eyes on a sizzling griddle. Short-order cooks had a knack for knowing the hot spots on their well-seasoned griddles. They'd drop the ground beef onto the sweet spot, breaking it up with signature metal spatulas that sang against the hot surface. The trick? Never stop moving the beef. The constant motion created those crispy little bits that made every bite irresistible. These cooks had their own secret language too. Paint it red, mint adding tomato sauce. Give it a blanket called for melted cheese, and make it cry mint piling on the onions. Each diner had its own special seasoning mix, kept in old coffee cans with holes punched in the lids, ready to shower that sizzling beef with flavor. The lunch counter beef scramble was all about rhythm and precision, with every diner getting a hot, delicious meal made right in front of them. Church supper beef squares. Next, we have church supper beef squares, a dish that brought entire communities together. Church basement kitchens were filled with giant pans large enough to feed half the congregation. The women running these kitchens had mastered the art of layering ground beef, cheese, and a secret sauce to ensure every square came out perfect. They'd mark the casseroles with tiny toothpick flags, creating a grid so that each serving was uniform. Nobody went home hungry, and everyone got their fair share. But the real magic happened during the baking. The timing was critical, as the delicious aroma would drift up into the sanctuary just as the service was ending. Some regulars swore they could tell which ladies were cooking that night just by the smell. Mrs. Johnson always added extra oregano, while Mrs. Miller's secret was a dash of celery salt. Church supper beef squares weren't just meals. They were an experience that bound the community together. Factory workers' beef roll. Then came the factory workers' beef roll, a recipe designed to fuel America's industrial workforce. These weren't delicate lunch sandwiches. These rolls were built to sustain the men and women running the factories. The dough was rich and sturdy, made with eggs and milk to keep it soft even after hours in a lunch pail. Inside, seasoned ground beef was mixed with rice and chopped vegetables, then rolled up tight like a jelly roll. The genius of the recipe lay in the slow, low baking process. The outside would form a crispy crust that protected the filling inside, allowing factory workers to slice off what they needed during their short lunch breaks. The rest stayed fresh for later. Some inventive cooks even hid surprises inside, maybe a line of cheese or pickles running through the middle, giving their hard-working family members a little extra something to look forward to during those long shifts. Boarding house special. As factory whistles faded and office buzzers took over, American cooking continued to evolve. In the bustling city boarding houses, where workers packed in tight during America's urban boom, the boarding house special became legendary. These weren't just meals. They were daily miracles that kept the Industrial Revolution running. The boarding house cooks were masters of resourcefulness, mixing ground beef with day-old bread soaked in milk. But here's the secret. They'd add a spoonful of coffee from breakfast. That bitter edge cut through the richness of the beef, giving the dish a deep, savory flavor. This simple yet inventive dish helped keep workers fueled and ready to face the challenges of the day. Every boarding house had its own signature spice blend, kept in a tin above the stove and passed down when a new cook took charge. The kitchens ran like clockwork, making sure a single batch of ground beef could feed 20 people and still taste like it was made for royalty. The secret? Layers of creativity. They'd start with a base of potatoes, then add the seasoned beef, followed by a gravy made from the morning's coffee and whatever vegetables were available. When times were tough, the cooks would stretch the meat with extra potatoes, but the coffee gravy was the true magic that made everyone forget the beef was getting scarcer. The simplicity of it all, combined with that hearty flavor, turned every meal into a satisfying feast. Beef and bean school lunch. In the 1950s, Beef and bean school lunches were feeding an army of growing kids with what seemed like endless supplies of food. Long before nutritional calculators, school cafeteria ladies had something far more powerful: years of experience and recipes tested on thousands of hungry students. The magic began at dawn. They'd mix ground beef with navy beans that had soaked overnight, then add a secret ingredient: a splash of pickle juice from those giant cafeteria pickle jars. This wasn't just to stretch the beef. The beans soaked up all those savory flavors, making every spoonful rich and satisfying. These cafeteria queens had timing down to a science. They knew exactly when to add the seasonings, and the final touches went in precisely 47 minutes before the first lunch bell rang. Seasonings were measured in coffee cans and pickle jars. Nothing fancy, but worked every time, feeding a generation of school children with a taste they'd never forget. Harvest time hot dish. When harvest time rolled around, something magical happened in farmhouse kitchens. Farm wives knew the timing was everything. They'd start with freshly ground beef from their own cattle and mix in whatever vegetables were ready in the garden. The real trick lay in the layering. Potatoes formed the base to soak up the flavors, followed by seasoned beef, then layers of corn, green beans, and tomatoes straight from the garden. But the real secret? A layer of cream-style corn right in the middle. During baking, this created a rich sauce that brought everything together into one savory dish. Each farm kitchen had its own twist, based on what grew best in their soil. In Minnesota, it was wild rice. In Iowa, sweet corn. These hot dishes weren't just about feeding the harvest crews. They were a celebration of the farm's best produce, a point of pride when neighbors gathered to bring in the crops. Corner store curry beef. Meanwhile, city cooks were discovering their own culinary innovations. In America's growing cities, corner store curry beef became a delicious fusion of cultures. Picture small neighborhood grocery stores run by families who brought their cooking traditions from across the world. They would take humble ground beef and transform it into something extraordinary, blending spices and flavors that reflected their diverse heritages. The result was a dish that captured the spirit of American melting pots, where every corner store had its own unique take on curry beef, mixing simple ingredients with rich, bold flavors. These dishes were a testament to the power of community and the creativity that could arise when different cultures came together. In America's growing neighborhoods, Indian and Pakistani store owners introduced their customers to a world of spices that most Americans had never encountered. They ground their own curry blends, coriander, cumin, and turmeric, and transformed ancient recipes to suit American palates and ingredients. The magic came when ground beef simmered with onions, garlic, and these unique spice blends until the aroma wafted through the streets, drawing in the curious. What truly made these spice shops special was how the store owners taught their regular customers to make the dish at home. Each storekeeper carefully measured out the spices into small paper bags and wrote down cooking instructions by hand, sometimes tailoring the blend to each customer's preferences. Mrs. Anderson likes it mild, or extra cardamom for the Johnsons. It was more than just selling groceries. It was about sharing culture, one recipe at a time. Mining town meat pockets. In America's mining towns, necessity turned into something uniquely delicious. Mining town meat pockets. These weren't your regular hand pies. They were built to fuel the men working deep underground. Mining wives knew that wrapping seasoned ground beef in a hearty dough wasn't just convenient, it was essential. The crust had to be strong enough to survive the rough conditions of lunch pails, yet tender enough to eat without utensils. They mixed rye flour into the dough, which not only strengthened the crust, but added a distinctive flavor that became a signature of mining town cuisine. The fillings reflected the diverse backgrounds of these families. Polish miners' wives added sauerkraut, Welsh families included turnips, and Italian households mixed in peppers and oregano. But no matter the variation, each pocket had one thing in common: a thick, crimped edge that served as a handle, keeping cold, dusted hands away from the main meal. Prairie school teachers' casserole. Out on the prairie, where one-room schoolhouses dotted the landscape, Prairie school teacher's casserole became a symbol of community care. For these young teachers, often miles away from home, survival during the harsh winters was just as important as teaching lessons. Each family would send in a little ground beef, potatoes, or whatever vegetables they could spare, and the teacher would combine them into a casserole that could feed the entire class during their noon break. Over time, the dish evolved with the seasons. In autumn, it featured fresh corn and tomatoes. During winter, root vegetables stored in the school cellar. But the real art was in the topping. A mixture of cornmeal and crushed crackers that would turn golden and crispy in the schoolhouse's wood-burning stove. Some teachers became so famous for their casserole creations that their recipes were passed down through generations, preserved alongside multiplication tables and grammar rules. Beef and biscuit boarding house stack. In the bustling boarding houses of growing cities, where time was money and hungry workers couldn't afford to wait, beef and biscuit boarding house stack became the talk of the town. This dish wasn't just a quick meal. It was an engineering marvel of layers and flavors. The genius began with the biscuits. Boarding house cooks would roll the dough paper thin, creating layers as delicate as silk. Between each biscuit went seasoned ground beef, but not just any beef mixture. The cooks would add finely diced onions and a splash of coffee from the morning pot, creating a rich, savory filling that complemented the soft, flaky biscuits perfectly. It wasn't just a meal, it was an experience, one that helped keep the hardworking men and women fueled for long days, making this dish a true classic in American kitchens. There was a trick that made the beef taste richer than anyone expected. The true mastery came in the assembly. They would stack the layers 6, sometimes 7 high, with each level getting a ladle of gravy that seeped into the thin biscuits. The bottom biscuits absorbed all the flavors, becoming almost pudding-like, while the top layers stayed crispy enough to crack when you hit them with your fork. Some boarding houses became so renowned for their beef and biscuit stack that businessmen fought for rooms just to enjoy a seat at the table, making it a local legend. General store beef supper. In small towns across America, the general store beef supper wasn't just about buying goods. It was where community traditions were cooked up every Saturday night. The back rooms of these general stores transformed into the heart of town life. Store owners knew every family's taste, so they'd start with local ground beef and mix it with rice that had been sitting on the shelves. Here's the clever part. They added a spoonful of pickled vegetables, finely chopped, mixing them right in. The pickled juices worked their way through the meat, creating flavors that no one could quite put their finger on. The secret method was passed down from generation to generation, and they combined everything in large crocks, letting it sit for hours while tending to the store. The warmth from the potbelly stove would slowly heat the mixture, drawing out all the flavors. By closing time, when families gathered, the beef supper had transformed into something magical. Farmhands' favorite. Out in the fields where work started before dawn and continued long after dusk, farmhands' favorite kept America's agricultural engine running. This dish wasn't just filling, it was fuel for the hardest working folks in the country. Farm wives knew exactly how to build this dish. They'd start with ground beef from their own cattle, mixing it with day-old bread soaked in fresh cream. The secret ingredient? Eggs, gathered that morning, beaten until frothy and folded into the meat mixture. These eggs puffed up during cooking, making the dish feel lighter while still sticking to your ribs. The cooking process was an art form. The mixture would be pressed into cast iron skillets that had been seasoned by decades of use. Each farm kitchen had its rhythm. Some cooked it slow and low on the back of the wood stove, while others would give it a quick sear and finish in the oven. The crucial step? Basting the top with butter and black coffee, creating a crust that sealed in all the juices. Sunday social beef squares. While farmhands were fueling up for their long days, church basements buzzed with culinary traditions of their own. Sunday social beef squares were a staple, bringing something special to American tables after church. These weren't just casseroles. They transformed fellowship halls into showcases of culinary pride. The women in the kitchens had perfected a technique modern cooks have forgotten. They'd press seasoned ground beef into special square pans, scoring the top in a diamond pattern. It wasn't just for decoration. It helped catch the savory sauce in tiny pools. Every serving came out identically, making sure no one went hungry and everyone got an equal share. The art of Sunday social beef squares. This skill was born from years of ensuring that no one at the social received a bigger portion than their neighbor. The presentation of Sunday social beef squares was pure artistry. These squares were carefully arranged on large platters, interspersed with vibrant rows of pickled vegetables from summer gardens. But the real secret was in the sauce. Each cook had her own version, but the base always began the same way. Pan drippings mixed with coffee from the church kitchen's percolator, simmered until thick enough to coat the back of a spoon. These Sunday socials weren't just about filling stomachs. They nourished community spirit. Young brides learned the art by standing at the side, absorbing whispered tips on how finely to dice the onions or how many times to score the meat. Some say you could tell which family brought the dish just by looking at the pattern on top. Victory Kitchen Surprise. When World War II changed everything, American kitchens responded with patriotism and resourcefulness, creating the Victory Kitchen Surprise. This dish wasn't just about cooking. It was about ingenuity at its finest. Home cooks became military strategists in the kitchen. They stretched ground beef with oatmeal. Because bread was too precious, soaked the oatmeal in tomato juice from their victory gardens, making it disappear into the meat while enhancing its flavor. The real triumph came in the substitutions. When onions were scarce, cooks would use dried onion skins from previous meals, soaked and minced. Garlic might be swapped with wild ramps picked from the woods. Every ingredient had a backup plan. Some even dried and ground celery leaves to use as seasoning when traditional spices were unavailable. Wartime cooks had a saying, use it up, wear it out, make it do, or do without. But they didn't just make do. They made dishes so good that families kept cooking them long after the rationing ended. Each Victory Kitchen Surprise is a testament to American ingenuity, transforming scarcity into a celebration of flavor. These forgotten recipes aren't just about ground beef. They're about the creativity that helped shape the country, keeping the history alive. From church basements to factory floors, each dish tells a story of turning simple ingredients into something extraordinary. With a few modern tweaks, they're perfect for today's families who want to create their own traditions. Every time we cook one of these recipes, we're preserving a piece of history. Which of these forgotten treasures will you bring back to your family table? If you've enjoyed this journey through America's kitchen history, don't forget to like and subscribe. Share your own family recipes in the comments below, because every recipe saved is a story preserved.